Voter turnout is a key way to measure how engaged people are in the election. And last time in 2022, the electorate was clearly yawning. There was record low turnout, around 43%. There were fears turnout would be even lower in this just concluded vote. So how did things turn out? To break it down, we're joined by Frazier Fathers, a Windsor blogger, podcast host, and researcher. Good morning.
Morning, Amy. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm glad you're able to be here for our post-election special edition.
Wouldn't miss it.
It's right, great. So we have early voter turnout numbers. What stood out to you?
You know, advanced polling turnout was down, right? And there's a number of reasons for that, right? In the 2022 election, for example, there were 10 advanced polling days, whereas this election only had 3 advanced polling days. So certainly the number of days, what days they were available, all play a role in it. Certainly the timing of the election. Usually Ontario and Canada in general doesn't have February elections. It's not, a thing that we do going in the middle of winter to the polls. And so a June election or a spring election or a fall election just makes it easier for some people to get to those advanced polls. So, it's not entirely surprising that advanced poll turnout was down, and that led to some prophesization about overall turnout.
Which we expected to be a lot lower. So were you surprised when you heard that it was actually up?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. And what that tells me is that, despite a lot of the talk of, the warnings, people were engaged on some of these issues, whether it was the Trump tariffs and, the reasoning for the election or opposition to the existing conservative government, the previous conservative government, and looking for a change. There was engagement in the community. And certainly, in Windsor-Essex, turnout was up, and we had some, we still have some turnout challenges in the region, particularly in Windsor West, where I live. But certainly, people showed up to vote, and that's a really important thing.
Did you expect these numbers? I know you said you were surprised, but were you hearing sort of rumblings of this during the campaign?
I was hearing, bits and pieces. Certainly when I went to vote, for example, I walked in and walked out. There was no line. So you can read that two ways, right? It's a very efficient operation. Elections Ontario does its job. People get in, get out, and it's convenient and easy. The other way to think about it is, well, it's convenient and easy because no one's showing up and, people are sort of standing around. And so, there were those rumblings, but, I also saw a concerted effort from local candidates to get their vote out. And I live in West Windsor, and sometimes West Windsor, parts of the neighborhoods, don't get people showing up at their doors, don't get people, coming and asking, hey, are you planning on voting? Those things. And I saw a number of canvass crews in my neighborhood at various points in time. And I heard from friends in other parts of the cities that they had people show up at their doors and, ask them if they were going to vote and things like that too.
It's an interesting observation you had at the polls, because when I walk in, I always look to see what's the turnout. Mm-hmm. And they were surprised with how the people working were surprised with how steady it mm-hmm. was. They said it hasn't been busy, but it's been steady. And mm-hmm. steady is good, because I know in previous elections when I've gone in, they've said, oh, it's been really kind of boring and everyone's fighting over who gets to put your ballot into the machine. Yeah. So there was some encouragement ahead of time, I think, when we were waiting on those numbers.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, you don't want to be standing around as work, any job, you don't want to be sort of standing around. So certainly, a steady pace, and that can create that illusion of you show up at the poll and the parking lot's empty, or, there's no one waiting in line. Again, that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing, depending on your perspective.
Does the voter turnout for this provincial election give us any clues about what to expect in the federal election?
I think it does a little bit. I think that there's something that you can glean there of, people are aware of, and you just can't ignore what's going on in the broader world. And certainly the leadership race for the Liberal Party is ongoing. And, once they have a new leader and who will be prime minister, that will be really probably the catalyst for whatever the next step is at the federal process. But I think the one challenge people have been having is, they're just bombarded by so much information. You have, Trump doing what Trump does every day. You had a provincial election happening. You have a federal Liberal leadership happening all at the same time. And so getting a clear message out from the candidates, from the parties to people, and really seeing how that resonates was really hard. And you sort of saw that a little bit in the polling, which sort of was off by a few percentage points in a few areas last night against the final results.
How encouraged should we be that turnout was up? Is there anything that needs to be done to keep the momentum going into the next election?
I think there's a lot of factors that feed into electoral turnout. It's not just one silver bullet, unfortunately, that, And so we should be encouraged, right? People were engaged in this election more so than the 2022 election. Windsor West had, somewhere in the 30%, 33% turnout in that election. We're up to 39, almost 39% this election. So again, lower than I would like to see it, but there's also a number of structural reasons in Windsor West. The university's there. There's some challenges with socioeconomic challenges in the neighborhood and those sort of things as in parts of that riding that, artificially suppressed turnout. Essex broke 50%, and you look at that. Well, again, if you want to dig into sort of the underlying demographics, well, Essex tends to be a little bit more affluent, in Lakeshore and in Lakeshore and in LaSalle and areas like that. And so they have the time, energy, and resources to be able to go to the polls and get there on election day.